Welcome back for part 2 of this video series demonstrating how easy it is to install and configure Customizer Lite. Once again, this is David Bell, Senior Development Manager and a member of the squad responsible for the Customizer technology at HCL Software. Today we are looking at part 2 of the series, preparing for running Customizer Lite by installing the underlying Docker components with which to host and manage the Docker images that make up the Customizer Lite deployment. There will be a mixture of a few slides plus some live demonstration of the installation process. Let's get started. For a small-scale single machine implementation, the system requirements are very modest, as you see listed here. Quad-core CPU, 8 GB of memory, and some disk space to hold the images, the running container storage, and the customization files. The initial Docker deployment is going to be a single machine hosting the 3 Customizer Lite services that were described in video 1. In my case, I'm using a CentOS 7 virtual machine. I'm going to demonstrate the installation of Docker and Docker Compose live on the video, but just wanted to describe the sequence of events that will be shown. All of the necessary information is listed in the Public Connections Knowledge Center. Just search for Customizer Lite. For Docker, there are some dependent packages and then just a few steps to install and run Docker. In this demo scenario for a single Docker machine, I'm going to just use the local file system storage and not set up a block device dedicated to Docker storage. Instructions for device setup are also in the Knowledge Center. Let's take a look. Just before we get on with the installation, I'd like to reference this installing Customizer Lite documentation. As we scroll through this page, we come to a section that talks about installing Docker, which is the first part we're going to do here. And it links to another article or another document in the documentation. And it says deploying an HA Kubernetes platform. Now, we're not building anything on Kubernetes here, but the steps to install Docker itself are documented there. And so if I look at that document, and we skip over the preamble, which talks about preparations for component pack and things like that, what we eventually get to is a procedure for installing Docker on each server. So you'll see the commands listed here. And there is also a corresponding document deploying a non-HA Kubernetes. Again, we're not deploying Kubernetes here at all, but the instructions to install Docker are available on this page as well. And we're going to basically mimic the installation here just to install Docker on our node. And for the sake of not having to suffer through typos, I have some commands ready to copy and paste. So let's move this out of the way and get on to our machine here. So first thing, let's just check the release we're running. We're running CentOS version 7. And so first thing we're going to do is install Docker CE. And we make use of the yum config manager. And so first of all, I want to make sure that the yum utils are installed. That says complete. So now we should be able to use the yum config manager. And first of all, I'm going to add the Docker CE repository into the configuration. And then we should be able to install Docker CE. Now, I am just going to install whatever the current version of Docker is from the repository. In those prior instructions, there were commands that allow you to choose specific versions of Docker if that's what you prefer. So yes, install package. It doesn't take too long. Complete. That's good. Now, to allow the logged in user to run Docker commands without actually having to sudo or elevate access, we can add the currently logged in user to the Docker group that's created as part of the install, which will give permissions to run Docker commands. So if we just look that I am logged in right now with a personal account, not root, and what I'm going to do is add my account name into the Docker group. And rather than waiting for a log off, log on cycle to refresh the group memberships, I'm going to run a command here just to tell the OS to use that updated group membership. Okay, so far so good. Now we want Docker to be enabled as a service so that it we started and stopped as a service. So I'm going to run a command to enable the docker.service. And lastly, we want to run that service. So we run command. We need to start docker.service. Okay. And now if we run a Docker command, docker info, what we should see is information about our installed Docker environment. So it looks like we picked up version 19.03 from the repository, and all looks good. And what we should find is that we have an empty Docker repository locally on the machine. And that completes the install of Docker. Pretty straightforward. Docker Compose follows a similar pattern to Docker. Again, there are some dependent packages and then just a few steps to install and run Docker Compose. So we installed Docker, and following on through the installation instructions here, we see the next step is to install Docker Compose, and the list of commands necessary to do that are listed here. And so we're going to do that installation of Docker Compose. So back over to our machine again. Next part of the installation is the Docker Compose components. So back on our machine here, first of all, we're going to install the extended packages, repository information. Yes. Then we are going to install the Python package manager. Docker Compose makes use of Python. So we're going to install the Python pip libraries. Okay, that's good. And now we can use the pip tool to install Docker Compose itself. So sudo pip install Docker Compose. Looks like I had some dependent packages already installed on this machine. But looks like we installed Docker Compose, and now that the Docker Compose packages are installed, I want to run an upgrade on the pip installation, just to make sure we're successful with having the latest versions of those tools. And last but not least, we're going to upgrade any Python dependencies now that we've installed Docker Compose. And looks like everything was current, so that's good. And now what we should be able to do is to verify the Docker Compose install with the Docker Compose version command. And we see here Docker Compose version 1.24.1 is installed. And that's all there is to it. That concludes part 2 of this series on deploying Customizer Lite. Next up, in part 3, we'll see how to install and configure the Customizer Lite services. This was David Bell, Senior Development Manager at HCL Software. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to speaking to you again in part 3.